In this video, I'm going to show you how to build multi-step forms in Webflow. After watching this, you'll be able to build custom lead generation forms, product configurators, quiz forms, onboarding forms, calculation forms, and a lot more. All of these forms that you can see here on the screen right now are built inside of the Webflow Designer, so you have full design control. To do all of that, we're going to use a Webflow app which I have created called Inputflow. Inputflow you can just install inside your Webflow account, and then you have the multi-step functionalities. For example, you can create validation rules so that the form shows an error message without the correct input. Or you can create conditional logic. In this form here, if a user selects marketing, they get asked which marketing strategy works best for you. But if they select finance, they get redirected to another step with a question about finance. Also, you can create animated progress bars so that the user always knows where they currently are inside of the form. Now, for you, there are two ways to follow this tutorial. Either you can build the form completely from scratch, starting essentially from a blank Webflow project. Or option number two, you can use one of my clonable templates that I've created. These templates, they are public and available to everyone, and you can find them here on my Webflow profile. I'll put a link to that in the video description and also show the link here on the screen. You can open that and then you'll get to this page where you can access the templates. And here you have some really nice templates. For example, there's a business onboarding template, a product configurator, a quiz form, a food delivery form, a calculation form, a lead generation form, and a lot more. Today I'm going to choose this business onboarding template as a starting point for my tutorial, but you can follow the tutorial with any of these templates, and also if you want to build the form from scratch. So I click on it, and then up here click on Clone in Webflow. Then I click on Create Site. Now I have to give it a name. Let's call it Business Onboarding Flow, and then I click on Create Site. All right, now we are inside of the Webflow project, and here we have our template form. And let's have a quick look at what's going on. So here inside of the navigator, you can see this is a normal Webflow form. We have our typical Webflow form block, the form element, and our Webflow success and error message. Also, if I select the form element itself and go to the settings panel, you can see we have our normal Webflow form settings. Nothing unexpected so far. Inside of the form, if I open this up, you can see I have all of these div blocks with the class onboarding form step applied to it. These div blocks are all stacked below each other, and we will later turn them into the individual steps of your multi-step form. So, for example, this one right here, this div block will be the first step, this will be the second one, this will be the third one, and so on and so forth. You get the idea. Inside of these div blocks, if I open this up, you can find your typical form elements. So you have your text, you have your buttons, and also inside of here you'll find the input elements. And this is the basic structure of all multi-step forms in Webflow. Even if you started with one of my other templates, or if you're building the form from scratch, this is the structure we need. Because now it's going to get really interesting. We're going to add the multi-step functionality. But before we do that, I quickly want to point out one thing. The class names for all of these form elements is not important. So in this case, I called it OB form or onboarding form step because that made the most sense, but you can choose whatever class name you want. Next, I'm going to click on this apps icon here in the sidebar menu. And then this panel opens up, and I want you to search for an app called Inputflow. This is a Webflow app which I have created that will enable this multi-step functionality, and I'm now going to show you step by step how it works. So you select it, and then you click on Install on Site. So you install the app. In my case, it says Launch App because I have already installed it. And then I click on Launch App, and then the Inputflow app opens up. In your case, if you haven't created an account, you quickly create an Inputflow account, and then you will get to this view right here. The first thing that we have to do now is we have to make a quick check. And that is why I go to the page icon here in the left sidebar menu. And then on the home page where the form is located, I click on Edit Page Settings. And then I scroll down all the way to the first custom code section called Inside the Head tag. Here we have to check that this line of code, this script tag is present. This is the Inputflow script that will later on the live site enable the multi-step functionalities. Without this script, the form will not work. So you have to make sure it's here. If you started from one of the templates, this will most likely already be here. If you're building the form from scratch, then you have to add it manually. I will put this into the video description so you can copy it and paste it right here. Once you've done that, you can click on Save and we can start to work with the Inputflow app itself. This first menu point right here is the Elements Manager, and you can think of it kind of like a setup assistant. We're going to use it to connect the form to Inputflow. The first element that we have to connect is the form itself. So I click on the form element and then we get this button, connect this form with Inputflow. I click on it and then it says form is now connected to Inputflow. In your case, if you're starting from a template, then this might already be connected and you could, if you want, disconnect the form, click on disconnect, and then you would also end up in the same spot where you can click the connect button. Next, we have to connect our step elements. So all of the elements that we talked about a few moments ago, this one right here. I select the first step element and then all of these buttons here show up. And then I click the step button. I want to turn the selected element into a step. And the step name is going to be, let's call it welcome step because this is the first one. And then I click on create. Now we have to do that for all the other steps as well. So I select the second step, also click on turn selected element into a step. And this step is called personal details step. And then I click on create again. In your case, if you're starting from a template, these steps are most likely already connected, but obviously you're going to add your own steps. And if you add your own new steps with your own custom inputs, then you have to follow the same process and connect all of them. The other steps in my form right here, they are already connected. I've already done that myself. So now all of our steps of the multi-step form are connected. The input elements, by the way, you don't have to connect them manually. Inputflow does that automatically once you connect the entire form. So you don't have to worry about that. But what we do have to connect are the next and back buttons. So these ones right here or these ones down there. They are necessary for the user to jump back and forth between the individual steps in our multi-step form. So to connect them, you just select a button. In this case, I choose this one and then turn selected element into a next button. Turned element into a next button. Perfect. And you have to do that for all next buttons and all back buttons inside of your multi-step form. However, there's a simple trick, and that is you can just connect one button and then turn it into a Webflow component and then put this component as a next button throughout your entire form. This way you don't have to connect all manually. So for example, I did that down here. Down here, there's a component called next button, and inside of the component, I have already connected the element to the next button. So I only had to do this once. Let's also do it for the back buttons. I select this back button right here, and then click on turn selected element into a back button. Perfect. The last element that we have to connect are the error messages. You can see next to each input is a text element, a red text element called error message. And we also have to connect that to Inputflow because right now in the default state, this is just a text element. Inputflow does not know that this is an error message. Because later inside of these error messages, we are going to display our validations. So for example, if a user enters a wrong email or no email at all, we want to tell this to them. We want to tell them inside of this error message, hey, you entered a wrong email. So I select my error message and then turn selected element into an error element. And here the same holds true. You have to do that for all error elements, or you do it for one and then wrap it in a component and then reuse the component throughout your form. And now we've connected all of the important elements to Inputflow. And now the really fun part begins because we're going to switch to the form editor. So I click on form editor here in the menu and then this larger window opens up. And here we immediately see some instructions. It says no form elements loaded. Publish your Webflow project to the webflow.io staging domain. So that's the first thing that we have to do. I click on publish and publish it to the selected domain. Let's wait until this is finished. Once it has been published, we can close this and move to the second instruction. Click the Load Elements button at the top right. This is the Load Elements button, and once I click this, Inputflow will go and load all of the form elements that we just created a few moments ago from our webflow.io staging domain. So I click on it, now it's loading the elements, and now they appear here in the sidebar. Remember, these are all of our steps that we created a few moments ago. Well, at least the first two, the other ones were part of the template already. I click on the step and drag them onto the canvas. And then I can work with these steps. I drag the second one onto the canvas and I can connect them with each other. And by connecting the steps with each other, we automatically decide in which order we are later going to show these steps to the website visitor once the form is finished. In this case, we want to start with the welcome step. After this welcome step has been finished, we want to show the user the personal details step. And afterwards, I want to show the user the business focus step, so I drag that onto the canvas and connect it as well. And I suggest we go to the live site and immediately try out if this is already functional. So I click on this arrow here to open the live site. And let's click on sign up. And you can see we go to the personal details step. And if I click on the next button again, we go to the business focus step, just like we configured in the form editor. If I click on next again, nothing happens because remember, after the business focus step, we haven't connected any further steps. And that's what we're going to do now. After the business focus step, I want to do something really special. And that is, I would like to add some conditional logic. So depending on what input the website visitor makes inside of the business focus step, I want to show them a different following step. So if the website visitor selects marketing here, I want to show them a step about marketing, but if they select finance, I want to show them a step about finance, asking what their interest is regarding finance. To set this up in Inputflow, I just drag the potential next steps onto the canvas, the marketing interest step, the finance interest step, and the product interest step, and I put all of them next to each other. Then I just connect the business focus step to all of these potential next steps. This way, the business focus step has 3 potential outgoing connections. And you could already see, as soon as I connected the step to the business focus steps, these conditional blocks showed up. They always show up when you have more than one outgoing connection from a step. And in this case, we have 3 outgoing connections. And with these conditional blocks, we can now decide when we want to send the user to which next step. I'm going to start with the marketing interest step. So I click on this conditional block and create a condition. So I want to send the user from the business focus step to the marketing interest step if, and now we see this modal here, where we have access to all of the input elements inside of the current step. So we want to send the user to marketing interest if the radio group business focus is marketing. That's it. You can make these conditions much more complicated. You could add an AND or an OR logic, but in this case, it's quite a simple condition. We don't need to complicate this. Let's do the same thing for the finance interest step. I want to send the user from business focus to finance interest if the business focus is finance. And for the product, I want to send the user through the product interest step if the business focus is product. Cool. Let's immediately go to the live page. I'm going to reload this and let's test it out. Let's click through the form and I select marketing and I get redirected to a step about the marketing interests. If I select finance, I get redirected to a step about finance interests. Perfect. So this is our conditional logic. Afterwards, here in the marketing interest step, I kind of have a small special case. I have another step called marketing strategy, where I want to ask the form visitor what their current marketing strategy is, but I don't want to ask this in case they took any of these other paths through the form. So I only put it after the marketing interest step, connect it, and then I want to send all of the users, no matter which of these steps they ended up with, I want to send all of them back to the step called biggest challenge, where I ask them about what their current biggest business challenge is. And that's why I connect all the steps to this biggest challenge step. Afterwards, it gets quite simple. I want to ask the user about their contact details and business details to contact them. And then in the final step, I want to collect some consent for privacy policy, terms of service, and so on and so forth. So this will be the final step. And also in the final step, if we go to our Webflow Designer and scroll down all the way, this is the final step. In the final step, we have a submit button. So this is not a next button, but a submit button, because here we want to actually submit the form. And this submit button, by the way, is a different element than our next buttons, because Webflow has two types of button elements. If I type in button here, you can see we have the normal button element. This is useful for our next buttons. And we have the form button. This form button should only be inside of the form once, at the end of the form, to submit it. Just a little side note, because a lot of Inputflow users make the mistake to use the form button throughout the entire form. All right, now our basic functionality is set up. You can see this is our structure of the multi-step form, and it already looks really good. However, the problem right now is that the user can just rush through the form without making any input. So for example, if they just leave these input elements blank here, fill out no email address or even a wrong email address, nothing happens. You can see they can just go through the form, barely making any input, and then submit the form at the end. Obviously that defeats the purpose of a form, so we have to add some type of validation. We already made the preparation for that in the beginning by creating all of our different error elements, and now we can make use of that. To set up validation in Inputflow, you can just click on the step where you want to validate a certain input, for example, the personal details step. And then inside the validations tab, you click on create validation. Then we get this interactive element, and I can choose which input I want to validate. And here you have access to all of the inputs inside of this step where we create the validation. I want to validate the first name input. The first name is invalid, and then I have to configure a condition if the first name is empty. That is when the first name is invalid, if it is empty, and then I want to display an error message, enter first name. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep going. I add another validation for the last name. The input element last name is invalid if the last name is empty. And by the way, is empty is not the only function here. You can set up quite complex validation rules with all of these other functions, but in this case, I just want to add a simple is empty validation. And we want to display the error message, enter last name. Then the final one for this step, input element email address is invalid if the email, and then we're not going to use is empty because there's a special email function called is an invalid email. And then we want to display the error message invalid email address. Let's test that out. I'm going to reload the page and then click on sign up to get to the next step. Now I try to go to the next step again, but you can see it doesn't work because now our validations take effect and we get our custom validation messages. And only once I've entered all of the inputs and made sure that the input is valid can I go to the next step. For example, if I only fill out my first and last name and put some random stuff inside of the email address and go to the next step, the first name and last name error message disappears, but the email address validation is still there. So I actually have to put out a correct email, test@example.com, for example, and only then can I proceed to the next step. I'm not going to show this for all of the steps now. If you want to learn more about how this validation works and how you can set up validation rules for the different input types, then just click this How It Works button inside of Inputflow, and this will redirect you to the Inputflow documentation. And down here, where it says validation and error message, you will find all the details that you have to know. And obviously also all the information that you need about Inputflow in general. Obviously, you can also set up validations, for example, like in this final step, the input element checkbox privacy policy is invalid if the privacy policy is not selected. And then we can display an error message, please accept the privacy policy. All right, I think our form already looks really good. However, one thing that I don't like about the form yet is when I click through the form, this progress bar here at the top doesn't really change. And I think these progress bars are really nice because they show the website visitor exactly where they are inside of the form. And this way they don't lose orientation, they are not confused, and this increases conversion rates. So I go back to the Webflow project, and to set up this progress bar, we are going to take a look at this template. You can see we have all of these different progress steps. And what we have to do now is we have to connect these progress steps to the steps of our form. So first of all, I select each of the individual progress steps and turn them into an actual progress step element with the Inputflow Elements Manager. Do that for the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and also the last one. And now I can select these individual progress steps and click on Connect Form Steps. So we connect progress steps with form steps. And here we have a drop-down list where I can decide when this progress step should be active. So I want this first progress step to be active if the welcome step is visible. I want the second progress step to be active if the personal details step is visible. I want the third step to be active if the business focus is visible, or if any of the following steps is visible, then this number 3 will still be active, the finance interest, marketing and product interest, and also if the marketing strategy is active. The step number 4 should be active if the biggest challenge is currently visible and if the business details step is visible. And the final progress step should be active if the privacy terms and consent step is visible inside of the form. So let's publish this to the Webflow project, then go to the live site, reload, and now you can see we're at the welcome step and the first progress indicator is active. If I go to the next step, we now have this nice animation, and now the second progress indicator step is visible. This will continue throughout the entire form. So if I make some input here, you can see and go to the next step. Now the third one is active. And obviously also if you go back, then it will animate in the other direction. You can style your progress indicator steps really simply with a combo class. So the way this works in the background is Inputflow applies a combo class. You can see right here, Inputflow applies a isCompleted combo class. And this way you can style the state of completed progress steps. And here with this one, it applies an isActive combo class. And this way we can style the active progress steps. If you want to change the name of this, you can just go to the form editor and click on the form settings. And down here, you have the setting called combo classes for progress indicators. And here you can change the name of these classes. Also here inside of the form settings, you will find a lot of other options to configure your form. And essentially, this is most of what you need to know to build a really cool multi-step form in Webflow using Inputflow. Inputflow will always be free on your webflow.io staging domain, so you can use Inputflow completely for free while you're building and testing the form. Once you want to publish your Inputflow form to your production domain, to a custom domain, we ask you to upgrade to a premium account. To upgrade your Inputflow account inside of the Inputflow form editor, you can click the blue upgrade button at the top right next to the account link. In my case, it is not visible because this account is already upgraded, but in your case, there will be a blue upgrade button. You can click it and then you'll proceed through the checkout process. Once the checkout process is complete, your form will, after about 30 seconds, immediately work on the production domain, on the custom domain as well. If you want to learn more about Inputflow, then I suggest going to our documentation, docs.inputflow.com. Here you will find all of the information about it. Inputflow has a lot more features than I showed you today. For example, we have calculations, conditional visibility, and a lot more. And you'll find all of that documented here. Also, you can go to our website, inputflow.com, and there you will find even more information. Okay, thank you for tuning in. My name is Mike. Have a great day. Bye.